Our guest speaker, Staff Sergeant Retired Andy Brown.
Thanks, Ruth. "20 years ago today, a beautiful summer afternoon turned to tragedy. A man with a rifle moved through the hallways and parking lots of Fairchild's hospital, leaving a trail of chaos and devastation in his path. Several men, women, and children received life-altering wounds. 5 families lost loved ones. Psychologist Captain Alan London was a devoted husband and beloved brother. Major Thomas Brigham, psychiatrist and family man. Anita Lindner was a loving wife and mother. She was active in Civil Air Patrol and a youth camp leader. Kristen McCarran was a giggling 8-year-old girl. She was a big sister who often put others before herself. And Michelle Sigmund, one of the wounded, lost her unborn child, Taylor, as a result of her injuries. On that cloudless summer day, I was a 24-year-old security policeman. I was working bike patrol. When the call came over the radio and I rode toward the hospital, it seemed like time slowed down. It seemed like it took me forever to get there. As I approached the area, I saw a man with a rifle walking down Graham Road in front of the hospital. He was firing his weapon at people as they scrambled for cover behind cars and in ditches. He refused to drop his weapon, and he fired in my direction. From a distance of approximately 70 yards, I engaged him with my Beretta M9. I fired 4 rounds, 2 of which hit their mark and ended the killing. My actions have been called heroic, but there were many heroes among the patrons and staff of the hospital that day. If not for their actions, the bloodshed would have been much greater. There would have been much more loss of life. Numerous patients, parents, and staff selflessly ushered loved ones and strangers to safety. Eva Walsh was a 57-year-old widowed dependent wife. She hid on the floor of the pharmacy under a counter. When 5-year-old James Sigmund ran past, Eva grabbed him and shielded him behind her back as she was shot several times in the leg. Michael Lecker was a sergeant with Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. He was at the hospital with his family. Sergeant Lecker struggled with the armed intruder in the doorway of the shot clinic. He denied him access and allowed others to escape. Staff Sergeant Dave Root was a supervisor in a pediatric clinic. As the intruder tried to enter the clinic, Sergeant Root held a set of fire doors closed and yelled for his co-workers to evacuate the clinic. While the subject was still in the area, countless medical professionals and bystanders selflessly cared for the wounded. After he was down, they continued their efforts undeterred as I and several other law enforcement officers searched and cleared the hospital looking for a rumored second gunman. The efforts of the 92nd Medical Group and 4 local hospitals in Spokane undoubtedly saved lives that day. Fairchild was hit hard, but was determined to carry on. And 4 days after the shooting, as the base was preparing for an air show, 4 officers lost their lives when a B-52 was flown outside of its limitations and crashed near the weapons storage area. Many of the airmen who had responded to the hospital on the day of the shooting now found themselves securing a crash site and searching a scorched debris field, recovering the fallen airmen. The base hospital was closed just long enough to replace carpeting and repair bullet holes. On the outside, everything appeared normal again. And some might assume that the people who experienced trauma that day might just as easily return to normal. But I've been in contact with many of the people who were there that day: doctors, nurses, med techs, firefighters, cops, and survivors. Few, if any, escaped mental trauma. And in varying degrees, that trauma is still with them today. I won't speak for them today, but I will tell you about my experience. I had always taken my role as a defender seriously. I prepared for a lethal force encounter by practicing a technique known as mental rehearsal. I would frequently visualize different scenarios where I would shoot to stop a threat. But my scenarios were flawed in that I never imagined anyone other than the perpetrator getting hurt. So I wasn't prepared for so many people being wounded or killed, people that I had a duty to protect. I reluctantly accepted awards for heroism. And though they were well-intentioned, the awards only served to remind me of the wounded and the dead and the grieving families. I didn't see myself as a hero or a lifesaver. I second-guessed my response and could only focus on how the killer could have been stopped sooner. I eventually moved to a new base, and I continued my work as a patrolman. But I had intrusive memories of the incident that caused a fight or flight reaction. I got anxious whenever I experienced noise, loud noise, crying children, or crowded environments. I was hyper alert and on edge. I assumed it was the shooting that was bothering me, but I didn't know why, and I didn't know how to fix it. And when I sought counseling, I was relieved of duty. So I stuffed my feelings, hid my symptoms, and pressed on with my duty. When I was off duty, I self-medicated with alcohol. I became withdrawn, depressed, and emotionally numb. As time passed, my symptoms intensified. Almost everything I saw invoked memories of the incident, and eventually, even a beautiful cloudless summer day caused me anxiety. I couldn't relax. I unconsciously clenched my fists, and it felt like electricity was constantly running through me. I was quick to anger and easily irritated, and the mild adrenaline rush that I used to get on a traffic stop now caused my hands to shake and my voice to quiver. So, 5 years after the shooting, the job that I loved now just became another source of stress. And I self-referred to mental health and was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, chronic post-traumatic stress. Counseling and medication didn't help, and although I was terrified to leave my law enforcement career, I chose, reluctantly, to get out of the Air Force. I returned to Spokane, where I met my wife and started a family. But my symptoms didn't improve, and I didn't assimilate very well into civilian life. I was bouncing from one industrial job to another. I couldn't sleep. I was irritable, depressed, and reclusive. I listened to a lot of news and talk radio programs that fueled my cynical view of the world and my community. I was constantly on guard and expected the worst from everyone I interacted with. If someone looked at me funny, I took it personally. If they followed me too closely in traffic or played the radio too loud, it was as if they were intentionally just trying to piss me off. Like many people with PTSD, I wasn't a danger to myself or others. I just didn't like the person that I had become. I wasn't the best husband or the best example to my young son and daughter. So I went to counseling and I attended PTSD programs. I tried various medications, but the relief was always temporary, and I began to accept that I would never feel normal again. For the sake of my wife and kids, I continued to search for healing. I read countless books about trauma and PTSD. I was searching for that one secret, that quick and easy cure. But I eventually discovered that my path to peace and recovery from PTSD wouldn't be quick and easy. It would consist of a series of small and deliberate steps. One of those steps occurred in 2006 when I found a fulfilling and purposeful job with the U.S. Border Patrol. Another step occurred in 2009 when, after repeated Freedom of Information Act requests, I finally received a recording of the law enforcement traffic, the radio traffic from 20 June 94. And for the first time, I was able to listen to our response. And I was relieved of a lot of guilt when I discovered it took me less than 2 minutes to respond and stop the killing. I started writing a book about the shooting and the history behind it, and writing and repeatedly confronting the details of the incident has diminished its effect on me, and writing has been therapeutic. In 2010, I completed 2 new programs through the Spokane VA, and instead of the usual talk therapy or masking symptoms with medication, these programs helped me process the shooting and uncover the source of my symptoms. I realized I had a lot of subconscious negative thoughts, and that those thoughts contributed to my negative feelings and symptoms. And when I learned to recognize and challenge those thoughts, I began to crawl out of the dark hole that I had fallen into. I moved further down my path toward peace when I took a break from the fear-generating news and mass media. I made a conscious effort to focus on the positive and be more empathetic and forgiving of other people. I also stopped self-medicating with alcohol. I found new ways to control my anxiety. When I was overwhelmed with stress, I learned that my breathing was shallow and rapid, and that by slowing down and focusing on my breath, I could clear my mind and calm my anxiety. I practiced being mindful, not dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, but being aware of the present moment. When I took the time to be aware of what was happening right now, I began to appreciate the simple things in life that I had taken for granted. I may never be the person I was before the shooting, but in some ways, I am stronger for it, and I have found peace. I haven't lost the habits that I developed as a patrolman. I'm still vigilant for evil and ready to stand in its way when it threatens innocence. The difference is there was a time where all I could see was the darkness, but today I practice a balanced awareness. I see the beauty in the world while I'm watching for the danger. Today, I can once again appreciate the simple wonder of a cloudless summer day. I'll never forget the survivors and heroes of June 1994. And although I never met them, I will never forget Kristen McCarran, Anita Lindner, Thomas Brigham, Alan London, or Taylor Sigmund. Because I didn't know them, I was hesitant to speak at this memorial ceremony. I was worried that I wouldn't pay them a fitting tribute. But whether you knew the fallen or not, we can all honor them today with a greater appreciation of life. Thank you.